Okay, Amanda, would you like to begin?
Sure. I hope everyone can hear me okay. It's great to have you all here. Thank you so much for being part of tonight's event to kick off the series of meetings we'll have. I see some familiar faces and some new faces, so it's great to have you here and welcome. My name is Amanda Carrico, and I'm the interim director of the Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Communities. And it's really my pleasure to welcome you all for the exciting program that's going to introduce you to the ecology of the ponderosa pine forests that surround us in Boulder, and all the effort and science that goes into maintaining and protecting our forest resources. So I'll hand it over to Karen in just a moment, but I did want to take just a brief minute to introduce you to who we are, to the Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Community, especially for those of you guys that are new to our organization. We're a center that lives at CU Boulder, but really probably better described as a, oh, did we lose Karen maybe? Well, she'll be back with us, I hope. But we live at CU Boulder, but we're probably better described as a cross-sector partnership that involves concerned organizations and citizens. We're comprised of a really unique collaboration of faculty and students and staff from the university, but also local organizations and agencies, including Boulder County, who's here with us tonight, the City of Boulder, the Boulder Watershed Collective, all of whom helped to put on tonight's events, and many engaged leaders in the community. And so the event that you're participating in here is one of many ongoing initiatives that the center has been working on and designing to engage community members and what we hope is a productive and useful discussion about the health and stewardship of our natural resources in Boulder. And that's really our mission as an organization. So I encourage you to check out our website to learn a little bit more about who we are and what we do and some of the other projects and events that are coming up in the near future. And I think at some point in the chat, maybe Erin or one of the other co-hosts can link our website into the chat. So if you'd like to find us, there it is right there. So she's linked it there so you can check out what we're all about, what we've got going on. And finally, I just want to say that we're really fortunate to receive support through the hours of dedicated volunteers, but we also rely heavily on the donations of concerned members of the community. And so if you enjoyed tonight's event, and if you're feeling that you're benefiting from the kind of work that we as a center do, I encourage you to please consider making a donation to the center so that we can continue this work. 100% of our donations feed back into putting on events like this and the other kinds of research and outreach initiatives that we have. And so you can easily find that link also in our website. So with that, I want to thank you again for being here. I really hope you enjoy hearing more from our experts and learning about Heil Valley Ranch and the ponderosa pine forest ecology, and that you really enjoy the experience that we've tried to generate for you. So thank you very much. And I'll hand it back to you, Karen. I hope that you're there.
Well, I'm going to proceed to welcome you tonight without the slides. And thank you for coming to the center's second in our Take a Hike series. This program is co-sponsored by the Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Communities, the Boulder County Open Space and Parks and Open Space Department, the 4 Mile organization, and the CU Masters of the Environment program. And we had a Take a Hike program last month that was focused on city open space lands. And tonight we're going to initiate our Take a Hike at Heil Ranch, which is a county parks and open space property. The people participating in our first program found that they saw things that they never noticed before, and really enjoyed the program, and I hope all of you will as well. Tonight's program focuses on 2 experts who are leading various parts of the program. And the first is Nate Gluckner, who is a CU graduate student in the Masters of the Environment program, and he has created the story map that you'll be using on this Take a Hike. And Stefan Reinhold is the county's senior forestry resource specialist, and he will be telling you about the ecology of our county's forests and ways that the Parks and Open Space staff manages the forests of Heil Ranch to improve both the forest health and reduce wildfire risks to people living nearby. So tonight's introduction to this Take a Hike program is an hour long. Will be done by 6:30, and then we allow you to have a couple weeks to go out and actually take the hike. And then we have a third segment, which is another Zoom meeting where you can come back and ask questions about the things that you've observed and noticed, and engage in discussions of the management of this area and what you're interested in. So without taking any more time, I'm going to introduce Nate, who is going to show you the story map that you'll be using as you take a hike on the Heil Ranch property. Nate?
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. So I will share my screen then and kind of give everyone a overview and kind of a layout of how this map works and some of the things that we have included in there. And thank you, Aaron. Aaron has also put the map in the chat. So if anyone would like to go into the chat and then click on that link, you can kind of follow along while I'm screen sharing. That might be a little more fun way to go about it. Right. Okay, so as you can see, so when you first are going to open this up, it's going to probably pan out to these two. So basically what these hikes are each a different map layer on this overall Take a Hike map. But so the one that we are talking about today is Heil Valley, and that is located here, just south of, kind of in between Lyons and Boulder. And as you can see right here by Altona. But so as you zoom in, so basically the way we have the map laid out is each one of these red fire icons is going to be a corresponding stop. So if you were to click on this, whoops, sorry, wrong one. So if you were to click on this, what would happen is it's going to be starting. So when you get to Heil Valley, you're going to be taking the Lichen Loop Trail, and that is going to, let me zoom in here. So from the parking lot, you're going to kind of be starting to your right, and it's all really well signed by the county. So there's plenty of signage, so just follow that. And you're going to kind of be going through these corresponding fire stops along the route, and each one of these has compiled information from Stefan, the senior forester at Heil Valley, and each one of these kind of has some outreach and educational information about kind of what you're seeing on the landscape here. I don't want to go into too much because I'm sure Stefan will cover a really good amount of it. But we also hear a new thing that we are trying, which is a little different from our previous one with Shanahan Ridge, is we've kind of outlined here what the treatment mapping, it's a little bit of a simplification of it, but it's pretty much the mapping that the county provided to a lot of the foresters to do some of this mitigation and restoration cuttings that were here. So one thing that's really nice is you're going to be able to hike this trail, but also look to your east, north, west, and south, and kind of be able to see these different treatment areas and kind of what those entail. So one thing that unfortunately is a little bit of a tricky thing is just on this Heil Valley loop. Generally, once you get kind of due west of this ridgeline here, you do lose some service. So to try to mitigate that, Aaron also sent out a PDF version of all of the compiled information. So that's going to have all of the information from the stops and all of the pictures that correspond with those stops. So you could download that onto your phone ahead of time, or you could print that out ahead of time. But then you can kind of have that on hand in case your cell phone service provider doesn't have the best of service. I was there a couple weekends ago with Verizon, and it was just enough on the Lichen Loop to kind of get by. But so just press on this parking button, and if you would follow this link right here, this is going to lead you eventually, here we go. This will lead you to a Google Doc, and so this is the exact same thing as that PDF that was sent out, and we have an updated PDF that we'll send out at the end of this. But this has all of that information basically compiled into a document that you could download onto your phone and then have that on your phone offline. So if you don't have service, you're still able to access a lot of that information. But so basically kind of just walking through this hike. You're going to be going down 36, turning on the left-hand canyon. Then you're going to be turning right onto Heil Valley. There's really good, or Heil Ranch. Heil Ranch. There's really good signing right there, and we have a couple of just information viewpoints, so you can look a little bit about some of the past fire history that has happened in this area of Boulder County, and then you can continue on. With this hike, there is the option of completing. So you're going to be going around this right-hand side of the Lichen Loop, and then here after this bend, there's unfortunately Google hasn't quite updated this, but it's really well signed and a very clear trail. But you'll be taking this kind of bridge path over to a potty trail, and then as you go up this, we have several stops. To make it more accessible to people, we kind of left the option here for you to stop at about this point, and that kind of gives you the option of continuing. All of these are actually trails at Heil Valley, so you could continue. Oops, sorry about that. You could continue up to your north, and then that would pretty much carve through a lot of the previous prescribed burn areas that the county has done up there. And that would then lead you to, I believe it's the Ponderosa Loop. Yep, right here, as you can see. And that is a loop up at the top of Heil Valley, basically. So you could then complete that loop and then hike back down. One thing that's a little confusing just about this area is we're stopping right about here. There is this road, but unfortunately, I think it's basically just going to be kind of a out and back hike once you hit this point. So you can hike back out here just because that road is used by, I think it's privately used road. Stefan, please correct me if I have that wrong, but we're going to direct most of that traffic just back down this way. And then you will finish off on
Nate,
that trail to the parking lot.
Nate, that road is, it's really for emergency access only. So we would prefer you got to that spot and turned around and came back down on the trail.
Perfect. Yeah, and you can't see it here, but just so you know, if you do see something that's wide and is a road, that we would prefer you to then hike back on the trail, just like Stefan said, to kind of keep that for emergency use only. But other than that, we also kind of added a couple of extra stops here. These are kind of more, after getting some feedback, one thing people said was they would like a little bit more of some wildlife information. So we have a wildlife checklist too that I would encourage people to take a look at. There's quite a bit of wildlife at Heil Valley. I would be surprised if you don't see turkeys, but so that's one thing to kind of look out for while you're hiking, since there is so much wildlife, and it's kind of a unique area of open space in that regards. But other than that, yeah, we will be providing you again with the Google Doc link and the PDF to have some of that information ahead of time so you can download it in case you do not have service there. And just again, to let you know, if you just click on this first informational or this parking blue point here, that will have this Google Doc link at the bottom, which will take you to that document with all of our information.
And Stefan, just for clarity, when you hike the Lichen Loop, can you take a connector trail from the Lichen Loop, the north edge of the Lichen Loop, over to the Wapiti Trail?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's outlined right here. Unfortunately, for some reason that wasn't exactly showing up on Google's updated, but as on satellite images, you can see it, and it's just a really short connecting trail right here, and it's pretty well signed by the county, so it'll be pretty easy to catch it.
Great. Thanks. Stefan?
All right. Let's see here. Give me 1 second to get to the PowerPoint. And then all right. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Looks good.
Great, great. So once again, my name is Stefan Reinhold. I'm the Senior Forestry Resource Specialist for Boulder County Parks and Open Space. I can't say that 10 times fast. It's a mouthful. But I was a private consultant for the good portion of my career. And then about 6 years ago, I took a job at the county. Great place to work, and they do some great management. So I'm glad to be here. So just a quick, here's our county. And we are, Boulder County owns outright 65,000 acres. All the dark green that you see on this map is county open space. A lot of the light green is conservation easements. So an additional 40,000 acres is protected with conservation easements. You might see some neon green in there, and that's where there's some joint ownership with other open space programs like the city. So, but as humans, we like to break things down into categories, and that's something that I'm going to share on the next slide, because part of understanding our forest is breaking it down into different pieces. So we get some crazy but awesome information. Now, this is a really confusing looking chart, right? But it has a lot of good information in it. And so it's trying to identify what are the vegetation types that are out there in Boulder County and in the Front Range, and where do they exist? Do they exist on exposed ridges? Is it dry or is it wet? And it's great information. However, it's not easy to use. And so we try to, then once we get all these categories, then we try to simplify things. So here's a little bit simpler version. Basically, when you start out in the lowlands, you start off in grassland, and you kind of slowly move into an area that has shrubs and ponderosa pine, savanna, and a little bit of woodland. And then you kind of slowly work your way into the lower montane, and that's where we're going to be spending most of our discussion point today. But as you go further up in elevation, you hit the upper montane, and then kind of into the subalpine. And so we can simplify this, and if you notice, that same chart, this is based off of this. And so we use a lot of, we use a lot of the information that's been collected and reinvent better ways to understand it. And so that's what this is. And so we're going to take it one step further and just be simple here. So here's a good view of, starting out in the grasslands, moving your way up through the foothills into the montane, and then you can even see the subalpine. So like I said, our main focus is going to be the lower montane. So this map is a little busy, but the one thing I want to show is the forestry. There's roughly 30,000 acres of our open space property is forested, and 14,000 of those acres are in the lower montane. So I'm going to hover over here. This is Hall Ranch here. This is Heil Ranch, Patasso, Walker. And so those are our biggest properties and where most of the work we do. We do have some properties up in the upper montane and kind of getting into the subalpine a little bit. But the majority of our properties are here. And so again, that's where our conversation is going to be focused. So the lower montane zone, it has an elevation range of roughly 6,000 to 8,000 feet. And again, that can change a little bit based on aspect. You might find some things at 8,500 feet that have the same similarities as the lower montane, or you might go a little bit below it and find some things that are very similar. So these aren't hard numbers, it's just a way for us to categorize it. The following species that you're going to see are ponderosa pine. That's the main species. You will see Douglas fir mostly on north-facing slopes, especially if you're down low. And then as you kind of get up higher towards that 8,000 feet, you're going to start seeing more Douglas fir throughout the properties. And then Rocky Mountain juniper is very common kind of on the lower end. There's going to be some cottonwoods and drainages. There might be some aspen and some drainages, but really these are the three main species that we're going to be dealing with. So just a couple more pictures of the lower montane. It's categorized by having a lot of clumps of trees and groups of trees, and then openings and spaces and all this here. That's what the lower montane should be. but there's a lot of areas in our lower montane that don't have that, and we'll kind of get into that discussion in a little bit. So again, here's another picture here. So we know, and again, I'll get into this in a little bit, but we know that historically, on a per acre basis, there were about 10 to 30 trees on a per acre basis, and they were large trees. They were 15 inches to 25 inches. Now, that's not to say that there weren't some dense pockets. It's not to say that there wasn't some small trees and some regeneration growing, but as a whole, these ecosystems existed because of low intensity wildfire. So I wanted to bring some historical photos into the mix. And here's a picture of Jamestown, or near Jamestown, from the late 1800s, and a similar picture here from 2007. And one thing you'll notice is there were a lot less trees back then. And a lot of people will make the point, well, there was logging, and yes, there was, but many of these hillsides, you can see the shrubs on there. So if I highlight over here, you know that these areas didn't have trees to begin with. These were shrubs on this hillside. So a more open forest structure. A couple more photos here, same piece. You can see how open this little ridge was. And then the north-facing slopes, because they have more moisture, of course, did have more forest on them. So again, the forest structure has changed because of us. So here's one last one, and this one is at Heil. And again, you can see these big open areas, and then there's pockets of trees, and it's really important to understand that was the structure that was able to withstand wildfire. And so why was it open? And I've already alluded to that. Because of fire, because of low intensity, for the most part, low severity wildfires. These areas had a fire return interval of somewhere between 5 to 30 years. For Heil, we know that it was actually down to, it's like 5 to 15 years. And this is from some data that has been collected. Again, you're going to see some areas where the trees were dense and fire would move up into the canopy and kill some trees. And that's what fire would do. And it would leave some snags, which would be great habitat for birds. So there's a lot, and when that snag fell, it would be great habitat for rodents and other animals. So it's a process that is no longer in our system. How do we know all this information? Well, a lot of it is done from dendrochronology. It's taking and looking at the tree rings or coring trees and finding out when fires occurred and how often. And we have a pretty good historical record of how often fires occurred on the landscape. So this article here, done by Peter Brown, Mike Battaglia, and a bunch of others, really kind of looked at the Front Range and said, well, how often did fires happen, and what was the forest like back then? And so there's this number here, and I'm going to explain it later, but there's this number down here they talk about, 10 to 60 square feet of basal area per acre. And it's a density measurement that we utilize to help make decisions, and I'll kind of get into that in a little bit. So kind of just trying to explain things a little bit better, Merrill Kaufman, and this is from the Cheeseman area, but it can definitely be translated to where we are. And it looks at things, and from our historical records, we know that on the landscape, 25% of the landscape was openings. Another 25% was this mix of ponderosa pine and Doug fir. And again, that's where you're going to see that on those north-facing slopes. Then a good portion of it would be just a ponderosa pine, open ponderosa pine forest. And then you'd have areas of old, hardened ponderosa pine that persisted on the landscape. You know, we had settlement, and we utilized a lot of that material. We needed it for a lot of different things. So a combination of logging, grazing. So when we set cattle out, they're eating the grasses, which normally would compete with the regeneration. And so the regeneration boomed, and we have all these trees that kind of grew up around the same time. So that's this whole big group in here that kind of expounded over time. And then when fires got started, we put them out to the point that in 1935 was the 10 a.m. rule, where if a fire got started, the goal was to have it out by 10 a.m. the next day. And we don't really realize, we didn't at that time frame realize that we were taking a process out of the system, and that is what's led to where we are today. So the goal is to bring this back and try to restore things on the landscape. Here's just a quick, another piece to this. So here's, if we had an opening, over time, trees are going to grow in, and they're going to fill in, or they're going to grow in and fill in and get dense. Doug fir likes it a little shadier. So if you have an existing forest, Doug fir will get established. But fire kind of kept all this in check and kind of moved things around and made sure that the structure that we have stayed on the landscape. Now, this is what we see in a lot of places now on the Front Range. Dense doghair thickets. And what do you think happens when fire hits these? Doesn't have the big, thick, protective bark that a ponderosa pine, larger grown ponderosa pine has. It's got branches down low. It's got deadfall. It's all reaching. If a fire gets in this, the bark isn't old enough to withstand the fire. And I shouldn't say old enough because that's not correct. These trees are 140 years old and still this tiny because they've been competing against resources. It's just not developed from low intensity wildfire. So we needed to figure out, well, what do you do and how do you change this? Another picture here is kind of, this is kind of how things progressed, if you want to think about it from that perspective, is areas were open. Regeneration started to get established. You can see regeneration floating here. You'd see a tree and all of a sudden a bunch of stuff starts growing around this one large tree. Eventually that tree will die, and then you're left with these doghair thickets. And look what's growing in the understory of that doghair thicket. There's no other plants. There's a thick layer of needles. So if a fire gets started, it can easily go right through those needles. If it hits some lower branches that it can catch, it can lead to the canopy. And then once it's in the canopy, we can lose big stretches of forest. If you look, again, this tour that we're doing, when you come into the property and you look to the west, you are going to see the overland fire. This is what the overland fire did. It ran through the canopy. And so those are the things that we're concerned about. So again, we have to think about how to fix this. So, just try to give you some visuals so you can kind of get a feel for what's going on. In the past, small trees might get established in the understory, but that frequent fire, an 8-year-old tree is not going to be very big, and the fire can come through and would kill many of those seedlings. If it's in the right location, or the fire might skip an area, and so maybe some regeneration pockets will get established, and you'll get that age diversity on the landscape. But our current system is we have all these small trees as ladder fuels that can lead up into the overstory. So we're really in a dangerous situation right now. And so the goal is, number one, I can't put prescribed fire into these dense locations because I know that this is what's going to happen. So I have to do, first off, I have to do kind of a structural restoration. And then we can do the reintroduction of fire and reintroduce and restore the process and the function that has kept our forests to where they are. So now kind of getting into the forest and fire management piece. So we don't operate in a vacuum. I don't just go out there and say, well, I learned what I learned in grad school and now this is what we're doing. We are constantly reviewing the new scientific literature that comes out. This great paper here, it's known as GTR, General Tech Report 373, is really kind of gives you a great perspective of what our forests should look like. We collect and analyze data. We look at that data. We write prescriptions. We work with our ID team, which is made up of plant ecologists, wildlife biologists, weed specialists, our trails group, our historic preservationist, our ranger. So we work with all these people, and we have them look at our prescriptions. And so maybe we need to alter a section to provide a corridor for the Abert squirrel to move around, or for elk to travel through. And so we try to adjust our prescription to fit the pieces that everyone else needs. Our trail corridor, well, if a trail crosses, does a switchback, do we want it so easy for us to see the people that are on the bottom of the switchback from the top of the switchback? Not necessarily. So we'll take all those pieces into consideration when we go through our process of our prescriptions. So again, we are doing our best to look at all of the science that's out there and adapt and make the changes we need. I wanted to give you kind of a quick big picture view of Heil Valley Ranch and kind of where everything is. So the yellow area here and these little bit of red up top, that is the most recent forestry treatment that is part of this tour that you will see. But we've been doing some pretty big forestry treatments all across Heil, and as a matter of fact, right now we are collecting data in this section right here, and the goal is to kind of have a treatment that runs north-south through the entire property. The treatments, some treatments areas have been treated mechanically, so doing tree cutting and removing the trees. Some areas have seen prescribed fire followed up those mechanical treatments, and there's a couple areas where we've done some prescribed fire where we actually haven't done any treatment because the area was able to handle a prescribed fire safely. So, forestry treatments, you've probably heard of a lot of different terms, but these are just the ones that we seem to use on Heil. So we've done some thinning. We've done some overstory removals. Now, what's an overstory removal? It's exactly what it sounds like. I mean, it's very similar to what people get scared of, a clear cut. It's removing the overstory. Now, in the areas that we're doing this work, we actually leave some larger trees, but it's important to create these openings on the landscape. They're not the same. It's not the same as a clear cut in terms of we're not doing it to create a product, to sell a product. We are actually doing it for the ecological purposes. You can do pruning, taking some of the lower branches off. You might see that happen around a lot of our parking lot areas, just to make sure that those areas are clean. Mastication, that's basically a tree lawnmower. We have used mastication in some areas where it's difficult to access. And basically it will cut the trees in place and mulch them on site, so we don't have to facilitate the removal, which is pretty expensive when you start to remove trees. And then fuels reduction. Fuels reduction is exactly what it sounds like. I'm just trying to take some fuels off the landscape, so if a fire gets started, there's not as much fuel, so hopefully we won't see the same devastating effects. And then there's forest restoration, and almost all the treatments that we do in the lower montane have forest restoration as a piece of what we're doing. The main impetus might be fuels reduction, but we are trying to do what we just discussed, trying to bring back that forest structure so that we can reintroduce fire. So, we're talking about the Lichen Loop fuels reduction project. So we went through and wrote a prescription for the area. We had the prescription approved in 2016. We were focusing on hazard fuels reduction because as of right now, if you want grant funding, you have to show that you are decreasing hazardous fuels. And so that's why the focus had to be there. This area was recommended to be treated by both the Community Wildfire Protection Plans for Left-Hand Canyon Fire Protection District and Boulder County's overarching Community Wildfire Protection Plan. We applied for FEMA funding in 2017. It was pre-disaster mitigation grant. We plan to match it with our internal funding and a state Forest Service grant known as FIRWORM, Forest Restoration and Wildfire Risk Mitigation. We applied in 2017. We were approved in April of 2019 is when we finally got the funding for the program. We awarded our bid in 2019. And what we noticed was, or when we put it out to bid, we knew that this was a very steep slope and also very rocky in places. And so using typical harvesting equipment, forestry equipment, ground-based equipment, we wouldn't have been able to do the project. There was no way to facilitate the removal of material. And even if we tried to do a different style of tree removal, we would have had to put in extensive roads to be able to do so. And so we decided that we were going to move forward doing this project with aerial yarding, namely helicopters. The contract began in mid-December 2019, and we are completed by March of 2020. So very, very quick project. A lot of material was removed. The material is going to be utilized to heat the jail and our open space complex, which is in Longmont. Some of the material will be used in some of our stream restoration projects as well. So we always try to utilize our material. It doesn't necessarily offset costs for the project that we're doing, but it may help offset costs for the county. So our biomass facilities do help offset costs for heating our buildings. We are going to be doing some touch-up work this fall. And the main reason is we had hoped to use Youth Corps to do a kind of the touch-up work, but the Youth Corps was canceled due to COVID. So our internal staff is going to regroup and finish everything up in the fall. Again, just kind of a quick perspective coming in off left hand. Here's Gear Canyon coming up. Parking lot sits here. And this is the area that we treated, a total of 162 acres. The area immediately around the parking lot, it's about 2.5 acres, has not been done yet. That's part of the internal work that we're going to do. So this topo tells you the exact reason why we're using helicopters. You can see how steep these lines are and dropping off. And basically from this portion north, this is all a rock field. And so again, we would not even be able to get ground-based equipment into the location. Just kind of an aerial perspective from the hillside across. This is only really half the project. It does extend further to the south there. But just kind of give you a feel, this is where the bulk of the material came from the treatment. The goal was to reduce hazardous fuels, to allow point protection of natural and man-made resources, create a forest structure that allows for the reintroduction of fire. It's not saying we are going to do fire as a result of the project, but we want to be able to do it if that's something that comes down the line. Our goal was to emulate pre-European settlement forest structure. I always get a kick out of that one because we blame the Europeans for the settlement and causing the problems, but really it was our own fault for settling the West. But we're trying to get a mosaic of clumpy, uneven age stands, some more open spaces, and a wide variety of stand densities. So we do want to have some pockets of dense trees. We just don't want it contiguous across the landscape. So now I told you I was going to teach you a little bit about basal area. So this is a kind of interesting information because it's a really easy measurement for us as foresters to make. We can actually use a small prism, a piece of glass, and I can walk through a forest, and in about 10 minutes, I can tell you what the basal area is by just walking through and taking a few plots. But the definition of basal area is on a per acre basis, and it's measured at breast height, and it's the cross-sectional area. So if you look at that little drawing, it's all those little cross sections there. So the reason we use it is, would you consider 300 trees per acre dense? Well, it really depends, because if it is 1-inch trees, my basal area is only going to be like 1.6 square feet per acre, which is really nothing. But if these are 10-inch trees, oops, it's going to be 163 square feet per acre. And so this measurement, this density measurement, takes into account the size of the trees and the numbers of the trees. And so it's a really great, quick measurement, and it's easy to teach people. Now the piece of glass is $70, so it's not cheap to figure it out, but it's pretty easy to measure basal area. So if you remember back to the earlier slide of the research with the tree rings on it, they said basal areas were 10 to 60 feet, square feet. This area, we had areas up in the northern portion of the project that were 240 square feet. The average of the whole area, not including the meadows, was 170 square feet. So we are way above the densities that we should be. And so our goal for the whole project was to reduce the basal area into the 20 to 80 foot range by looking at existing density levels. If an area was already dense to begin with, we would drop it to this density level 1. If it was moderate, we'd drop it to this density level 2. And then if it was a pretty open area, we'd want to make sure that that meadow stayed on the landscape. So we would be cutting and pushing the meadow back to kind of open things up. Additionally, we identified some areas where we wanted to make a big opening and to kind of put those openings back on the landscape. And you can see on the next map that I flip to, you'll see it. I'll show you in a second. But then we also want to retain all legacy trees. And there is, on the hike, you will learn a little bit about legacy trees as well. But essentially, a legacy tree is a tree that has some old growth characteristics. There are kind of 7 different characteristics of old growth. And we consider anything that's got 5 of those a legacy tree, and a tree that we want to maintain on the landscape. So I said I was going to show you this. So here's where we decided to do those openings. This map, Nate, I do believe that this map is part of the presentation, so you guys should be able to take a look at it. But you can see the different density levels. Like this green area is the real dense area, the blue level is the moderate, and the red level is kind of that more open side. So when we had that research done by Peter Brown et al., they looked at and told us where a bunch of legacy trees were. So we actually went out as a forestry crew and identified all the legacy trees that we saw on the landscape. And you'll notice, I'm going to flick back and forth between these 2 pictures, but you notice we tried to put the openings where they weren't, or where they weren't concentrated. The openings that we created, though, we didn't cut the legacy trees. We left them. So they basically are just more open areas where the understory was removed. So now I'm going to kind of show you a few pictures here that show you the different, what we're seeing on the ground. And so, you can see we're seeing these large trees that many of these have legacy, have the old growth characteristics and are considered legacy trees. But look at all the small stuff that's come up underneath. This stuff would not have come up if we had low intensity, frequent wildfires on the landscape. What you'll also notice is a lot of these trees are leaning to the side. Trees have phototropic tendencies. They want to grow towards the light. And so they're trying to find the resources. They're all battling for the resources. They are weakening the larger big trees that are there. And so not only is it a fire hazard, but it also is a forest health hazard. As trees get weakened in these situations, insect and disease will take advantage of that and come to the area. So what we're doing is cleaning this up, and you will see on the tour and in the stuff that Nate put together, you're going to see some before and afters of some of these areas. I'm not going to spoil it here. Again, you can see some of these large ponderosas that got started, and look at all this smaller stuff that got established in the past 120 years. And there's another photo there. And again, look at that, you know, the phototropic tendencies of these trees really trying to bend and find light. And then we're going to have some areas where, you know, this was probably a meadow, but look at all the regen that's already coming in here. So, you know, we might leave these two trees, but then take all that regen out. Or conversely, we might say, you know what, this is a good spot to have a small pocket of trees. We may actually take these out so that I can have some age diversity on the landscape. I don't want to lose all the small trees. So when we go out and we mark the trees, these are the things that we're trying to decide on and build the structure that we want to see. So then I know we're getting close on time, so I'm going to have to be quick on fire, but I actually didn't have much on here. But fire is a tool that we can use. So some areas we do pile burning. It's really hard to get trees out of the forest. The slash material, what do you do with that slash material? So some of our properties like Hall Ranch, they are perfect for piling, slash, and burning. And we utilize our the sheriff's office to assist us with that. Broadcast burning is when you kind of burn across the landscape, and that's what we did here at Heil Valley Ranch. Then there is some other things that some people do, which is windrow burning, and that's where you take slash and you pile it in huge piles and burn it. We don't really do that here. That does cause a lot of heat to the soil and can cause some issues. And then some of the other fire stuff that we do is non-forestry. So we burn ditches and we burn ag lands and things like that. So it's just another tool. But we have plans to continue burning our fires. What we want to make sure, number one, is that we're burning when it's safe. All of our prescribed fires, we are well staffed. Just like I had the forest ID team and ran everything through my group of specialists or my ologists, we do the same thing with our prescribed fires. We discuss, is there a certain plant species that is really heavily affected by fire and we want to avoid? Or is there an area they want us to burn? Because we will work that into the plan as well. You know, for this situation, you can see we purposely piled some slash up against these trees because our initial prescription, we didn't meet it. We didn't get down low enough. So we wanted to induce some mortality. That's going to be beneficial because now we're going to have some snags in the woods that are going to be perfect for wildlife habitat. We work, once we get the Parks and Open Space to approve our plans, then we have the sheriff's office and they write our burn plans for us and they implement them. We participate and assist and pay for it, but they will implement for us. So just like our you know, we have goals and objectives for our forestry treatments, we have the same thing for our fire treatments. And just a few more photos of some of our prescribed fires here. And again, I know we're getting close on time, but you can see, you know, right, this is like right after our prescribed fires, we get wildlife in there quickly. I was telling some people earlier that we had one fire where we burned this one section and then it happened to be lunchtime. So we all stopped and ate lunch. And then you see the turkeys run right into the burn scar and it's still warm. And they're out there just pecking away and eating at the bugs. And so there's a lot of other benefits to prescribed fire. It helps rejuvenate the grasses and provide, rejuvenate some of the shrubs as well. So again, just a few more photos of our prescribed fire activities. This one right here you will actually see this piece off of the trail during your hike. and you probably couldn't even tell. So I know this says final thoughts and questions, but I'm going to do one real quick section here. I just want to show you some aerial photo progression, and then I'll go back to the question slide. But you know, back in 2000, I think that's not too. I think trees started a few years earlier than that. But a lot of the work that had been done on the land, actually, this area is state land board land. So a lot of it was done by the Forest Service, State Forest Service, excuse me. But I just want to show you just how things changed over time. So it's a big change to 2004, where we started doing some thinning operations. And then as we started learning more, we started doing some mastication type work in different areas. And then there's kind of a big jump between this 2010 and 2014 section, because that's when we started to realize, well, we shouldn't have trees perfectly spaced. We really need to have more of that, what we call groupy clumping. We need to have groups of trees, clumps, and then maybe an individual tree here, an individual tree there, and then some openings. And so in the next slide, we kind of move to that. So you can kind of see, I'm going to go back. You can kind of see how we changed the landscape. So once we got it to the structure we wanted, that's when we reintroduced fire. So I know I tried to cram a lot into that short period of time, but any questions now, feel free to ask, and I don't know how we're going to moderate that, but then also you can submit some questions that we can answer in the after seminar.
Great, thanks very much, Stefan. You've given us a lot of things to look for and pay attention to as we go out on the land and take our hikes. And I'm going to try one more time to share my screen and see if it works. Keep your fingers crossed.
Yay!
So as Stefan said, you'll have an hour of opportunities to ask questions and suggest your observations when you were out there on the land. After you take a hike, the next step in this program is for you to actually go and take the hike, use Nate's story map to follow the route, and look at the color codings and the different kinds of treatments that Stefan and Nate have made visible in the color codings on the story map that you have. As you make observations and come up with questions, please feel free to email them to the center and keep track of them in your notes. And then on Wednesday, October 21st, we'll look forward to seeing all of you again for an hour with Q&A with Stefan. And I'm sure you'll have a lot of good observations and questions by that time. I already have a few myself, so thank you for joining us this evening. And we'll look forward to seeing you. I want to give a round of applause to Stefan and Nate and Aaron Freed, who has been the coordinator for the programs for the Center for Sustainable Landscapes and Communities, and has been taking care of all the registrations on Eventbrite and the emails to communicate with you. You'll be receiving more emails in follow-up to this session with the links that you need to be able to find the story map and get the document to print so that you have a backup hard copy when you go out there for your story map. And have a great hike, and we'll look forward to seeing you all on October 21st. Same time, same station.
And Karen, I just want to say that I can stick around and answer a few of the questions if people want me to. So
great.
So trying to see if I can find one of the first ones there. The presentation be available later. I think someone already commented that it
Yes.
has been recorded. I could share this at the PDF in a PDF version. Let's see here. Someone asked about noxious weeds. Yeah, so our noxious weed group is on our ID team. And so in areas that are have heavy noxious weed issues on the front end, We usually have them get out there and do some preventative spraying, and then post-treatment, they have it on their work plans to try to revisit once a year for at least for the first 5 years. There was another question about mullein, and yes, mullein is the one thing that does come back very strongly after our treatments, especially our prescribed fire. We don't, we do try to get in there and do some treatments from the noxious weed standpoint. But one thing that we have noticed from the Overland fire, which we had a ton of mullein come back, over time the mullein has kind of disappeared, and even though it's a non-native, it has acted as almost as a cover crop for us in some situations. Again, it's not a desired piece. And someone mentioned about scrub oak. Luckily for us, we do not have gamble oak in our properties at the moment. That would be very difficult because gamble oak and something like Douglas County deals with a lot of gamble oak, and if you burned in gamble oak, it's going to resprout, and it's going to have way more many stems per acre, and it's going to spread and become a problem. It's similar to chaparral in California. So it's something that we are lucky. We do have it in the county, it's just not widespread, and and a lot of it was actually introduced. People planted it thinking, oh, a nice shrub to plant in my yard, and didn't realize that it is not easy to control.
And is it native further south?
Yeah, I mean, it's a native species. It's just it is because of climate change. It is moving further north. And so if you have it, you got to mow it. That's the only way to keep it down. Mow it or herbicide, unfortunately. Someone asked about masticating and do we try to burn in those areas? We have not yet burned in our masticated unit, but that is in one of our next prescribed fires. And yeah, the goal is to decrease the amount of material that's on the ground. Something we call, after treatments, we call it activity fuels. So even branches that might have been left there, or there might have been an area that we did lop and scatter or chips. We'd like to have those consumed in prescribed fire. Unfortunately, they're also very difficult to monitor and make sure that they are out and that they burn out during our prescribed fires. So those areas, it is sometimes better to do our prescribed fires in the fall so that we can time it up against a snowstorm, get the burn done so that we can actually get some heavy moisture on the landscape. I'm not sure if I missed any questions. Sure I did, but.
One of them says, I don't know whether you've already hit this, can satellite images be used to guesstimate forest basal numbers?
Yes and no. The technology is there. There's actually something called structure from motion. And so just not even use LiDAR. If we flew things with LiDAR, yes, we could actually get some phenomenal numbers very quickly. But from normal aerial photos, there's something called structure from motion. And so it's taking photos from different angles, and then there's a whole big computer program that you jam it through and run it through. We don't have that capability yet at the county, but it is something you can measure. You can approximate by looking at things. I mean, I can always approximate by looking at aerial photos, but you really need a ground truth.
Great. Well, thank you very much to all of you, and thanks for coming and participating in this session.
And I did see one last question from Trace there about LiDAR. And the answer is yes, we could do LiDAR from county drones. We're not there yet. We would have to purchase a separate camera, and our drone program is kind of just getting off the ground, so no pun intended. So once that's figured out, we will look at that. Can residents help with TSI projects? We do a lot of volunteer projects, and a lot of it is smaller cutting. There are some liability issues for someone to use to be using a chainsaw on a project for us, but it's definitely something we could look into. But we do a lot of I have one of my employees is dedicated to doing volunteer events. A lot of the stuff that we do is piling of slash, reseeding pile scars that we've burned. So we do utilize volunteers a lot. We also use them to do we have some research plots that we're having volunteers help us with. And someone asked what percentage of Colorado forests could use this kind of treatment. The Front Range, they estimate about 1.5 million acres. So we got 160 done. So.
And the city open space department also does this kind of work on their forests.
There's another good question about the big logs that are stacked up. So those are going to be utilized in our, like I said, in our biomass facilities. That is our temporary storage for those logs. And some will also be used in one of our stream restoration projects. Some of the bigger logs will be used for that. So.
Great.
All right. Well, like Karen wanted to say earlier, take a hike, enjoy, get out there.
Thank you so much.
It's a great property.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.